On the night of her 20th wedding anniversary, Claire sat alone at the most expensive restaurant in Boston. 7 months pregnant, silk dress, empty chair across from her. And then her phone buzzed. It was a photograph. Her husband, another woman, a nightclub across town. The caption read, and I need you to hear this. The caption read, "Upgrade complete." Now, most women would have cried. Most women would have called him. Most women would have fallen apart right there between the breadbasket and the sparkling water.
I'm so happy for you both.
Claire did none of those things. She signaled for the check. She left a 25% tip. And she sent 3 text messages that would begin the most calculated, most quietly devastating response her husband never saw coming. Because what Derek Hartwell did not know, what nobody knew, was that the woman he had just discarded as an upgrade was sitting on an empire worth nearly $1 billion. Built in secret, built in silence, built while he thought she was doing nothing. This is not a story about revenge. This is a story about what happens when a woman who has spent 20 years being invisible finally decides the world is ready to see her. Stay until the end, because the last 10 minutes will change how you think about your own power. Lesson statement. We talk a lot about being more visible, more aggressive, more demanding, and sometimes that is exactly right. But there is another strategy that nobody talks about enough. Building quietly, preparing precisely, waiting for the exact right moment to show the world what you have actually been doing all along. Claire did not win because she was louder or more aggressive. She won because she never stopped building, even when no one could see it. She won because she understood that visibility is not the same as value. She won because the moment she stopped letting someone else define her worth was the moment everything changed. That moment is available to every single person listening to this. The greatest power you will ever have is the power to define yourself. Use it. If Claire's story stayed with you, leave a comment below. Tell me where you are watching from. Tell me what part hit hardest. If you know someone who needs to hear this story right now, share it with them. That is how these stories travel. Hit like if you believe that the most underestimated women in every room are usually the most powerful ones. Subscribe because next week we have a story about a woman who discovered her husband had been living a second life for 7 years. And I promise you, you are not ready.
The champagne arrived at 8:47 in the evening. Claire Foster Hartwell knew this because she had been watching the clock for 43 minutes, and because the waiter who brought it was too young and too kind to hide the pity in his eyes when he set the ice bucket beside the empty chair across from her. She thanked him. She smiled. She did not touch the champagne. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Luminara, Boston's most quietly expensive restaurant, February moved through the streets with the particular cruelty of a New England winter that has run out of patience. People outside walked fast, collars up, heads down. Nobody lingered. Nobody waited. Claire waited. She was 42 years old. She was 7 months pregnant. She was wearing a silk dress the color of cream that had cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her dark hair was pinned at the back of her neck in a way that her mother had once described as elegant, and her husband had not described in years. She was, by any visible measure, the picture of composed grace. She was also the only person seated alone at a table for 2 in a room full of couples celebrating things, and she had been alone for long enough that the other diners had stopped pretending not to notice. Her phone buzzed. She looked down, expecting an apology, a traffic excuse, a meeting that ran long. What she got was a photograph. Her husband, Derek Hartwell, 47, CEO of Hartwell Capital Group, face of Boston Business Monthly 3 times this year, stood in the middle of a nightclub she recognized as Vault, with his arm around a woman Claire had never seen before. The woman was approximately 26 years old. She had honey-colored hair and the particular confidence of someone who has never once been made to feel invisible. The caption beneath the photograph read, "Upgrade complete." Claire set the phone face down on the tablecloth. She sat with that for exactly 30 seconds. Then she picked up the phone again, opened a different app, and checked the quarterly revenue figures for Foster Technology Group, the cybersecurity company she had been running for 11 years under her maiden name, while her husband believed she spent 3 days a week volunteering at a literacy nonprofit. The numbers were good. The numbers were, in fact, extraordinary. She flagged 3 items for morning review, closed the app, and signaled to the waiter. He came quickly, the way people do when they are grateful to be needed. Claire said, "I'll take the check, please. And please keep the champagne for another table. Someone should enjoy it tonight." He nodded. His eyes were very kind. She paid with her own black card, not the household account card Derek had given her for what he called household expenses. Her card, the one connected to accounts he had never seen. She left a 25% tip because the waiter had been kind without making it strange, and that deserved acknowledgement. Outside, the February air hit her like a sentence she had been dreading. Her driver, a steady man named Marcus, who had worked for her private company for 4 years and who used her maiden name when they were alone because she had asked him to, was waiting at the curb. "Home, Ms. Foster?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Please." In the back of the car, with the partition up and the city moving past the windows, Claire Hartwell allowed herself exactly 4 minutes to feel everything she had been holding back since she saw the photograph. Her hands shook. Her breathing went ragged at the edges. The careful architecture of her composure developed cracks she could feel but not see. She pressed one hand flat against her belly, feeling her daughter shift and settle inside her. 7 months. 8 weeks until her due date. 4 minutes. That was all she allowed. Then she put on her sunglasses, even though it was nighttime, because sometimes you need the boundary of something between your face and the world. She opened her phone and sent 3 messages. To Morgan Hayes, her chief financial officer, who had been with her since the beginning and who communicated primarily in dry observations and unconditional loyalty. Accelerate the Meridian merger. 3 weeks, not 3 months. To Stephanie Cole, her attorney, the kind of lawyer that made opposing counsel check their notes twice and then check them again. He asked for it tonight. Morning meeting, bring coffee, and everything we have on the prenuptial trust analysis. To Garrett Walsh, her head of security, former FBI, a man who expressed care through comprehensive background checks. Full report on a woman named Jessica Lane, Vault Nightclub, Boston. I want everything by Friday. The responses came back before Marcus had driven 6 blocks. Morgan, finally. The paperwork has been ready for 4 months. Stephanie, coffee will be excellent, so will this. Garrett, already pulling. You're going to find this very interesting. Claire read all 3. She set her phone down. She looked out the window at the city her husband thought he owned, and thought about the fact that she was worth, at that precise moment, more than everything Derek Hartwell had ever built. He did not know this. He was about to. The townhouse in Beacon Hill was dark when she arrived. Beautiful, expensive, completely Derek's in every way that mattered. She had spent 18 years in these rooms, performing the role of a woman who belonged to the space. She let herself in, made herself eat something because her daughter needed food even when Claire had no appetite. Cheese, crackers, a glass of milk. She was putting the glass in the sink when she heard the front door. Footsteps. Heavy. Careless. The walk of a man who had been drinking and who did not expect consequences. Derek appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was still handsome. That had always been part of the problem. The kind of handsome that reads as authority in boardrooms. It's that photographs well, that makes people lean toward you before you have said anything worth leaning toward. His tie was loose, his shirt was wrinkled. He smelled of champagne he had not drunk with her, and perfume that was not hers. "You're still up," he said. "It's our anniversary," Claire replied. He blinked, and in that blink, in that fractional pause before he recalibrated, she saw something she had been trying not to see for years. He had genuinely forgotten. "Right," he said. "Look, we need to talk." "I know," said Claire. And what happened next was not what he expected. She did not cry. She did not plead. She did not perform the devastation he had, she now realized, been counting on, to make himself feel less like the person who had sent that photograph with that caption, "Me selfie the night of their 20th wedding anniversary." She simply said, "Tell me." So he did. Derek talked for 11 minutes. Claire counted. He said the word "grown apart" 4 times, as if repetition would make it feel less like a decision and more like a weather event. He said he was men trying to be cruel, which is something people say when they are, in fact, being cruel and would prefer not to be held accountable for it. He talked about a fair settlement. He mentioned Jessica by name, which was interesting, because when Claire had received the photograph, Jessica had been labeled simply "upgrade." Apparently, she had been promoted to a person with a name somewhere between the nightclub and the kitchen. He talked about the baby with a careful neutrality that made Claire's jaw tighten once, just once. He said, "You'll get the house, a monthly allowance. Obviously, the child support will be generous. I'm not a monster." Claire said, "I know." He said, "What I mean is, think about what you actually need, realistically. You've been out of the workforce for a long time." Claire said, "Have I?" He said, "We both know you don't have any real marketable skills anymore, Claire. That's not an insult. That's just the reality of spending 20 years as someone's wife." She looked at him for a long moment. She said, "Good night, Derek." He went upstairs. She waited until she heard the bedroom door close. Then she walked to the bookshelf in the home office, pressed a panel behind the third shelf that looked like a wall and was not, and descended a set of stairs into a space Derek Hartwell had never seen and would not have believed. Her real office. 3 monitors displaying real-time data from Foster Technology Group's global operations. A wall of patents and awards, all under the name Claire Foster. A corner shelf with a frame needlepoint that Morgan had given her as a joke 5 years ago, which read in cheerful cross-stitch lettering, "She believed she could, so she absolutely did, and nobody knew about it for 11 years. It was Claire's favorite thing she owned. She sat down. She pulled up the files. And here's the story she reviewed in the quiet of that hidden room while her husband slept 12 feet above her head. 11 years ago, Claire's grandmother had died and left her a trust fund. Not enormous by the standards of the world Claire now moved through, but significant, established before the marriage, never commingled with Derek's accounts, entirely hers under both the terms of her grandmother's estate and, she had been careful to confirm, Massachusetts property law. She had used that money to found Foster Technology Group. She had told Derek she was starting a literacy nonprofit. The nonprofit was real. She funded it generously. It was also, over the years, one of her most effective recruiting pipelines, because it attracted brilliant young women who had been told they were not technical enough to succeed in technology. And Claire had learned that people who have been underestimated tend to work with a particular quality of determined precision. She had built the company from that office, while Derek attended conferences and gave interviews and had his photograph taken for magazine covers. She had grown it to 340 employees. She had filed 47 patents under the Foster name. She had secured contracts with insurance companies, financial institutions, and 2 federal agencies that required security clearances to discuss. Annual revenue, $340 million. Her personal net worth at this precise moment, just over $900 million. While Derek was explaining to her that she had no marketable skills, she reviewed her files for an hour. Then she opened her calendar and blocked the next 72 hours. She had work to do. The next morning, she drove to Stephanie Cole's office in Midtown Boston, a glass-walled suite on the 38th floor, where the coffee was always excellent and the outcomes were almost always favorable. Stephanie met her at the door. Stephanie Cole was 51 years old, with silver hair, cut short and precise, and eyes that cataloged everything. She had been Claire's attorney for 9 years, which meant she had been among the handful of people who knew about Foster Technology Group. She was one of the sharpest legal minds Claire had ever encountered, and she expressed affection primarily through comprehensive preparation. She had brought 2 coffees and a folder approximately 2 inches thick. "He filed this morning," Stephanie said. Claire sat down. "Already?" "Richard Calloway." The name landed in the room like something heavy dropped from a height. Richard Calloway was the most feared divorce attorney in Massachusetts. He had a 94% win rate in contested cases. He had been practicing for 23 years. He was also, Stephanie said, holding out the folder, Derek's college roommate, and his retainer had been signed 6 weeks ago. "He knew this was coming," Claire said. "He has been planning this significantly longer than you have," Stephanie said. "The filing includes a motion for full asset disclosure. Any business interests built or grown during the marriage. Under Massachusetts law, even separate property can be considered marital if the other spouse's resources, connections, or support contributed materially to its development." Claire was quiet for a moment. "They're going to argue that I used his name," she said. "His name, his network, his social position. They'll say being Mrs. Derek Hartwell gave you access and credibility that enabled Foster Technology Group to succeed." "I used his name as a disguise," Claire said. "Not a ladder." Stephanie looked at her carefully. "I know, but we need to prove that to a judge." Claire thought about 11 years of client contracts signed as Claire Foster. 11 years of pitch meetings where she had introduced herself by her maiden name. 11 years of invoices and patents and NDAs signed before any counterparty knew she was connected to the Hartwell name. "I have the documentation," she said. "Show me," said Stephanie. So she did. And then she showed Stephanie something else. Something she had been sitting on for 3 months, waiting until she was certain, waiting until it was airtight. She opened her laptop and turned it so Stephanie could see the screen. Stephanie read in silence for 4 minutes. Then she sat back in her chair and said, very quietly, "Claire." "I know," Claire said. "Derek's company is built on your technology. Approximately $200 million of their recent growth. Yes. He stole from you. Someone he paid stole from me. The source code for our primary data security algorithm was leaked by one of my junior engineers 18 months ago. The engineer was quietly dismissed. I traced it back to a payment from a shell company connected to Hartwell Capital." Stephanie stared at the screen. "This is a torpedo." "I don't want to sink the ship," Claire said. "I want him to understand what he took. I want my daughter protected. I want to walk away with what is mine." Stephanie looked at her for a long moment. Then let's be very precise, she said, about exactly how we use this. Morgan Hayes arrived at Claire's hidden office at 7 that evening with takeout containers, a spreadsheet already open on her laptop, and the specific energy of someone who has been waiting a very long time for a particular phone call. She was 38 years old, with short red hair and the kind of dry humor that made serious situations survivable. She had been Claire's CFO since Foster Technology Group had 11 employees and operated out of a rented office space above a dry cleaner in Cambridge. She knew everything. She had known everything for 11 years. She communicated her feelings primarily through food and financial projections. She set the takeout on the desk. She said, "He actually sent the photograph," with a caption. "He did," said Claire. "On your anniversary." "On our 20th anniversary, yes." Morgan opened a container of pasta. "I have been professionally calm about Derek Hartwell for 11 years. That ends tonight." She stabbed a piece of rigatoni with considerable precision. "What's the plan?" Claire walked her through it. The Meridian Group merger had been in negotiation for 18 months. The Meridian Group was a European investment consortium looking for a technology acquisition. They had been courting Foster Technology Group quietly and consistently, and the valuation they had proposed would put Claire's company at just over $1.1 billion. Claire had been patient about the timing. She had wanted the circumstances to be right. The circumstances were now right. 3 weeks, Morgan said. 3 weeks, Claire confirmed. "I've had the paperwork structured for 4 months, Morgan said. "I was waiting for you." "I know you were." Morgan pulled up her spreadsheet. They worked for 3 hours, going through the merger terms, the asset documentation for Stephanie's case, the financial trail that demonstrated Foster Technology Group's independence from any Hartwell money or influence. It was precise, meticulous work. Claire found it steadying. At 10 o'clock, Garrett Walsh called. Garrett was 53, former FBI, the kind of man who delivered information with the flat affect of someone reading a weather report, and who expressed loyalty through thoroughness. He had worked for Claire's security division for 9 years. "Jessica Lane Satsum," he said. 26, originally from Connecticut, 2 years at Boston University, did not complete degree. Worked in hospitality at 3 different upscale venues before Vault. No criminal record. 2 civil disputes, both financial, both with former partners. She has a pattern. "What kind of pattern?" Claire asked. "Wealthy older men. She targets them specifically. Researches their schedules, their routines, their vulnerabilities. The relationships last 6 to 12 months. Then she moves on, usually with some kind of financial arrangement." "Is Derek her current arrangement?" There was a pause. "That's the part that gets complicated," Garrett said. "Jessica Lane's father is Warren Lane." Claire waited. "Warren Lane," Garrett continued, "is one of Hartwell Capital Group's largest institutional investors. Has been for 7 years. He has been quietly purchasing additional Hartwell Capital stock through shell companies for the past 18 months. The room was very quiet. Morgan had stopped typing. "He's acquiring a controlling interest," Claire said. "Not yet. But the trajectory suggests that's the goal. If Hartwell Capital's stock price drops significantly, which it would in the event of a damaging divorce scandal, Lane would be positioned to move to majority control at a fraction of what it would cost him otherwise." "And Jessica," Claire said slowly. "Jessica was not an accident," Garrett said. "Based on what I've found, she approached Derek at Vault on a night she knew he would be there, based on information that could only have come from someone inside his calendar. The relationship was initiated deliberately. The photograph that was sent to you tonight was sent from Jessica's phone." "She sent it," Claire said. Not Derek. Derek gave her the photograph. Jessica sent it. Whether Derek knew she was going to send it with that particular caption is less clear. Claire sat with this for a moment. Her husband had not simply fallen into an affair. He had been maneuvered into one, and then someone had used that affair as a weapon against her, timed to a divorce Derek thought was his idea. He thinks Lane is his ally, she said. He has no idea, Garrett said. Thank you, Claire said. Keep digging. I want everything. She ended the call. Morgan was looking at her with the expression of someone who has just watched a chess game become significantly more complicated. This isn't just a divorce, Morgan said. No, said Claire, it isn't. She stood and walked to the window, the Boston skyline at night, all lit glass and quiet ambition. We proceed as planned, she said. The merger announcement goes out in 3 weeks. We document everything. We give Stephanie everything she needs. And Warren Lane? Claire turned back from the window. Warren Lane, she said, is afraid of something. I want to know exactly what it is. Morgan made a note. Then she pushed a container of pasta toward Claire. Eat something, she said. You're building an empire and a human being simultaneously. Both of them need fuel. Despite everything, Claire smiled. It was small. It was real. Thank you, Morgan, she said. Eat first, Morgan said. Thank me later. The meeting with Richard Calloway's office the next morning was designed to be intimidating. It succeeded. Stephanie had warned Claire. Richard Calloway's conference rooms were engineered for psychological effect, she said. High ceilings, heavy furniture, artwork chosen to communicate that power had been accumulating here for a long time and did not intend to share. Richard himself was 60 years old, silver-haired, impeccably suited, with the practiced stillness of someone who had sat across the table from devastated people for decades and learned to read fear before it reached a person's face. He had brought 3 associates. Stephanie had brought herself and a coffee. Richard said, "We appreciate your willingness to discuss terms early in the process. We believe an amicable resolution serves everyone's interests." Stephanie said, "We appreciate that perspective." Richard said, "My client's position is straightforward. 20 years of marriage, no premarital agreement, a lifestyle significantly funded by Mr. Hartwell's earnings. Mrs. Hartwell's decision to operate a business under a separate name during the marriage raises serious questions about good faith disclosure of assets." Claire kept her face neutral. Stephanie said, "Ms. Foster's business was established with premarital inheritance funds, operated entirely independently of any marital accounts, and was consistently identified in client-facing materials under her maiden name. We have 11 years of documentation to that effect." Richard said, "We'll need to review that documentation. We're also filing a motion requesting that Foster Technology Group's valuation be assessed as a marital asset pending discovery." There it was. 3 words. Marital asset. If the court agreed, Derek's attorneys would argue that half of everything Claire had built, 11 years of work, 340 employees, $900 million in value, belonged to the man currently moving his girlfriend into their home. Stephanie's expression did not change. She said, "We'll respond to the motion through appropriate channels." On the way out in the elevator, she put her hand briefly on Claire's arm. "This is a pressure tactic," she said. "They don't actually think they'll win on the marital asset argument, but it creates uncertainty. It forces us to spend resources defending the classification instead of going on offense." "Can they freeze the accounts?" Claire asked. "Not without a separate injunction, which they would need grounds for." "And the Meridian merger announcement?" Stephanie was quiet for half a second. If we announce the merger before the court has ruled on asset classification, Callaway will argue, "We rushed it to lock in the valuation." He'll file for an emergency injunction. It's a risk. How big a risk? Meaningful. But the alternative is delaying the merger and giving them more time to complicate the asset picture. She paused. "Claire, this is your call. I can tell you the legal landscape. I can't tell you which risk is worth taking." Claire thought about it for the rest of the day. She thought about it while reviewing merger documents with Morgan. She thought about it while answering emails from Foster Technology Group's engineering team about a product launch. She thought about it while eating dinner alone in her kitchen, the townhouse quiet around her in the way that houses get quiet when they have been shared for a long time and then suddenly are not. She thought about Eleanor, her daughter, 7 months along, strong and impatient and already taking up space in the world with admirable commitment. She made her decision. That evening, she called Morgan. "We announce in 3 weeks," she said. "As planned. If they file an injunction, we fight it." "Understood," Morgan said. "Start the clock." "Already started," Morgan said. "Also, I looked into Warren Lane." "And?" "He has been purchasing Hartwell Capital stock through 4 different shell companies registered in Delaware. The purchases are timed with notable precision around specific Hartwell Capital announcements. Insider trading is a strong word, but it's the right word," Claire said. "It is indeed the right word," Morgan said. "Garrett is building the full picture. He'll have it by end of week." Claire sat with that for a moment. Something was taking shape. Not just a divorce, not just an asset dispute, something larger. Something that had been moving underneath the surface of her life for 18 months while she had been building her company and managing her pregnancy and trying to understand why her husband had become steadily, quietly, completely a stranger. "Good," she said. "Let's see the whole picture before we move." She went to bed. She did not sleep for a long time, but when she did sleep, she dreamed of Eleanor, her daughter's face, which she had not yet seen, which she already knew. She dreamed of introducing her daughter to a world where she would not have to pretend. The Meridian merger announcement went live on a Tuesday at 8 in the morning. Foster Technology Group, valued at $1.1 billion. Merger with the Meridian Group, one of Europe's most respected investment consortiums. Claire Foster, founder and CEO, a woman most of the business world had never heard of, on the front pages of every financial publication in the country by noon. The Wall Street Journal ran the headline, "The Invisible CEO, How Claire Foster Built a Billion-Dollar Empire While Boston Wasn't Looking." Forbes called her one of the most significant technology executives of the decade. Bloomberg reached out for a cover story. And Derek Hartwell, sitting in his office at Hartwell Capital Group at 9:45 in the morning, found out the same way everyone else did, from his phone. His assistant later told Morgan that he had sat very still for 45 seconds after reading the notification and then asked everyone to leave the room. Morgan relayed this to Claire at 11:30 while they were in the Foster Technology Group conference room watching the coverage accumulate across 3 screens. 45 seconds, Claire said. 45 seconds of complete silence, Morgan confirmed. Then everyone out. Morgan was crying. She was also eating a celebratory croissant with considerable enthusiasm, which Claire found deeply characteristic and deeply comforting. "We did it, boss," Morgan said. "We did it 11 years ago," Claire said. "We're just telling people now." She felt something that afternoon she had not felt in a long time. Lightness. The specific relief of a weight you have been carrying so long you forgot it was there, and then it lifts, and you feel the absence of it in every part of your body. She went home. She sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and thought about what came next. Her phone rang at 6:15 in the evening. It was Stephanie. They filed, Stephanie said. The marital asset motion, emergency injunction. Callaway is arguing that the merger announcement constitutes intentional dissipation of marital assets, that you rushed the deal to lock in the valuation before the divorce settlement could be reached. He's asking the court to freeze all Foster Technology Group operating accounts pending a hearing. Claire set down her tea. The operating accounts, she said. All of them. Morgan runs payroll from those accounts. We have 340 employees. Payroll runs in 4 days. I know, Stephanie said. If the injunction is granted, we can fight it, but it will take at minimum 2 weeks to get a hearing date, possibly 3. 3 weeks, 4 days until payroll, 340 people who had trusted her with their careers and their livelihoods, and who had families and mortgages and lives built on the assumption that their paychecks would arrive. What are my options? Claire asked. We file an emergency opposition tonight. We argue the injunction is retaliatory and unsupported by fact. We request an expedited hearing. It may work, it may not. The judge we've drawn for this case, Judge Oakes, is fair but methodical. She does not like to be rushed. And if we lose the emergency opposition, Stephanie was quiet for a moment, then we have 4 days to find another way to make payroll, which would require either a bridge loan from Foster Technology Group's credit lines, which Callaway would then argue is further dissipation of marital assets, or a private infusion of capital, which has its own legal complications. Claire sat in her kitchen. Outside, the February night pressed against the windows. She pressed her hand flat against her belly. Her daughter kicked, once, firm, insistent. File the emergency opposition tonight, Claire said. Draft it aggressively. I want Callaway to understand that every day this injunction stands, we will cost them more legal fees than they can justify. Already drafting, Stephanie said. And Stephanie, what are the odds? Another pause. 50-50, Stephanie said. I won't lie to you. Good, Claire said. I've never needed anyone to lie to me. She ended the call. She sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Morgan. Worst case scenario, she said. If the injunction holds for 2 weeks. What are our options for payroll? Morgan did not pause. She had already been thinking about it. Our secondary credit line is unaffected. It's structured as a personal guarantee from you, not from the company accounts. Technically, it's outside the scope of the injunction. I'd need Stephanie to confirm, but I believe we can run payroll from that line if necessary. Would Callaway challenge it? Possibly, but by the time he did, the payroll would have processed. It would be harder to claw back than to prevent. Claire closed her eyes. Do it, she said. Set it up as a contingency. Don't execute unless the injunction holds past Thursday morning. Done, Morgan said. Then, after a moment, Claire. Yeah. We've been through hard things before. I know. We will get through this. I know that too. I'm also going to bring soup tomorrow because you sound like you haven't eaten a real meal since Tuesday. And growing a human is nutritionally demanding. Despite everything, Claire laughed. It was small. It was genuine. It was enough. The injunction hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Wednesday arrived first. Garrett delivered his full report on Warren Lane at 8 in the morning. Claire read it at her kitchen table with coffee she did not taste. It was worse than she had expected. Warren Lane had not simply been buying Hartwell Capital stock through shell companies. The timing of his purchases, cross-referenced against Hartwell Capital's internal announcement schedule, revealed a pattern that was not subtle once you knew to look for it. He had been buying on insider information that could only have come from someone with access to Hartwell Capital's pre-announcement communications, someone on the board. And if that came to light, Warren Lane was not looking at a civil dispute. He was looking at SEC investigation. Criminal exposure, the kind of legal consequences that ended careers and began with federal subpoenas. He had filed his lawsuit against Foster Technology Group, the $400 million tortious interference claim, not because he expected to win. He had filed it because he needed Claire distracted. He needed her spending her energy and her legal resources defending herself, instead of looking too closely at what was behind the curtain. She called Stephanie. She called Garrett. She called Morgan. She held 3 separate phone calls in 40 minutes, triangulating information, building the complete picture. And then she sat very still for a moment and looked at the whole thing, spread out in front of her in the clean logic of documented evidence and financial records. Derek had not planned this divorce. Warren Lane had. Derek had been moved into position like a piece on a board, guided toward an affair with a woman whose father had a controlling interest objective, manipulated toward a divorce that would destabilize Hartwell Capital's stock price at precisely the moment Lane needed it low. Derek thought he was making a choice. He had been chosen. And Claire, in this scenario, was meant to be destroyed quietly in the divorce proceedings, her company tied up in litigation, her resources depleted, while Lane completed his acquisition of a company her husband had stolen technology from. Claire's company, her technology, her empire, used as the vehicle for someone else's financial scheme. She had time to process approximately 40% of this before her phone rang and her world changed again. It was the hospital, not a crisis. Her doctor, calm and professional, checking on some elevated readings from her last appointment. Could she come in for a follow-up that afternoon? She went in. The follow-up was reassuring but cautious. The baby was healthy. Claire's blood pressure was elevated. Not dangerously, but notably. Her doctor, a steady woman named Dr. Patterson, who did not soften things unnecessarily, said, "Stress is a measurable, physiological event, Claire. Your body is telling you something." Claire said, "I hear it." She went home. She sat in the kitchen. Her phone rang at 7 that evening. It was Stephanie. "The emergency opposition was denied," Stephanie said. "Judge Oaks wants a full hearing. She set it for next Wednesday. The injunction holds until then." Payroll ran in 2 days. "Execute the contingency," Claire said. "The secondary credit line, already in motion," Morgan said, from what Claire now realized was a 3-way call. Morgan had anticipated this. Of course she had. "The Lane lawsuit," Claire said. "Garrett is documenting everything," Stephanie said. "We have the beginning of something significant. We need another week to build it to the level where we can use it." "We have a week," Claire said. "The injunction hearing is Wednesday." "Yes. Then we work the problem." She was still on the phone when the first contraction hit. It was not like the practice contractions she had been having for weeks. This was sharper, more insistent, the kind of physical certainty that does not leave room for interpretation. She said, "Stephanie, I have to go." "What's wrong?" "I think," Claire said, with the particular calm of someone managing a crisis that is happening inside their own body, "that my daughter has decided she is not interested in waiting." She called Dr. Patterson. She called Morgan. She did not call Derek. The ambulance arrived in 11 minutes. Morgan arrived in 14, breathless, still in her coat, having apparently run 2 blocks from where her car had gotten stuck in traffic. She held Claire's hand in the ambulance. She said, "You're going to be fine." "She's going to be fine," Claire said, through a contraction. "That is not a medically supported statement," Morgan said. "No, but I mean it, which counts for something." Claire said, "Morgan, yeah, thank you for being here. There's nowhere else on earth I would be." Eleanor Claire Foster Hartwell was born at 2:17 in the morning on a Thursday. She was 6 weeks early. She was small and red-faced and furious at the indignity of being rushed, and she was the most perfect thing Claire had ever seen in her life. They placed Eleanor on Claire's chest, and something broke open in Claire that had nothing to do with the divorce or the injunction or Warren Lane or the 11 years of building in secret. Something much older than any of that. She said very quietly, "Hello? I'm your mother. I've been waiting so long to meet you." Eleanor looked at her with the unfocused certainty of someone who has not yet learned to doubt. Derek arrived at the hospital at 6 in the morning. He stood in the doorway of the recovery room. He looked at Eleanor, small and sleeping, and something crossed his face that Claire had not seen there in years. Something human. "She's beautiful," he said. "Yes," said Claire, "she is." He stayed for 20 minutes. He held Eleanor for 4 of them. His hands were careful, in a way that hands are careful when they understand they are touching something irreplaceable. Then he left. Claire watched him go. She felt no triumph. She felt no anger. She felt the specific exhaustion of someone who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and is only now beginning to understand how heavy it actually was. Morgan came back at 8 in the morning with flowers and red eyes and an expression of wonder that she made no attempt to conceal. "She looks like you," Morgan said. "She looks like herself," Claire said. "She's entirely her own person. I could see it immediately." Morgan sat in the chair beside the bed and looked at Eleanor sleeping in the bassinet. "What happens now?" she said. "Now we go home," Claire said. "And then we finish this." The injunction hearing was rescheduled when Stephanie notified the court that Claire had given birth. Judge Oakes, to her credit, moved it without comment and without penalty. 2 weeks later, Claire sat in the new apartment she had moved into while Derek remained in the Beacon Hill townhouse, Eleanor in a carrier against her chest, and reviewed the complete file Garrett had assembled on Warren Lane. It was airtight. The insider trading documentation, the shell companies, the timeline, the board member who had been the source, a man named Gerald Fitch, who had accepted payments from Lane's private accounts in exchange for pre-announcement data. Gerald Fitch had a family. He had not known or had chosen not to know how far down the road he had traveled. Claire sat with the file for a long time. She thought about the $400 million lawsuit Lane had filed against her company. She thought about the injunction that was still holding her accounts. She thought about 340 employees whose jobs depended on the company Warren Lane was trying to destroy. She thought about Derek, who had been maneuvered and manipulated by a man he considered an ally. Derek, who had done genuinely terrible things, who had stolen from her and dismissed her and sent that photograph with that caption on the night of their 20th anniversary, but who had also, she now understood, been a tool in someone else's plan, not a victim. He had made his choices, but not entirely the architect of this particular destruction. She called Stephanie. "I know what we're going to do," she said. The meeting happened in a conference room at Richard Calloway's firm on a Tuesday morning. Claire arrived alone. No Morgan, no Garrett. Oh, just Claire, a folder, and the particular quality of presence that comes from having nothing left to perform. Richard Calloway sat across from her with 2 associates. He looked at her with the careful assessment of a man recalibrating his understanding of a situation. She had been in the hospital 2 weeks ago. She had a newborn. She was 8 weeks postpartum. She had a company under injunction and a $400 million lawsuit filed against her. She looked, he would later tell someone, like someone who had passed through the worst of something and come out the other side knowing exactly what she was doing. She slid the folder across the table. "Please review the first section," she said. "Take as long as you need." Richard Calloway opened the folder. He read for 6 minutes, then he looked up. "Where did you get this?" he said. "That's not relevant," Claire said. "What's relevant is that it's documented, verified, and complete. Warren Lane has been trading on insider information provided by Gerald Fitch of your client's board. The purchases are timed with enough precision to be provable. This goes to the SEC within 48 hours. Unless, Richard said. Unless, Claire confirmed, the injunction on Foster Technology Group's accounts is lifted. Today. The Lane lawsuit is withdrawn. Today. And your client agrees to meet with me this week to discuss the terms of a final settlement. Richard looked at the folder again. "You're giving Derek the information," he said slowly. "About Lane. I'm giving Derek the opportunity to understand what has been done to him," Claire said. "What he does with that information is his decision. I'm done making decisions for Derek. I was never supposed to be making them in the first place." Richard sat back in his chair. "Why?" he said. "You could go directly to the SEC. You could file your own civil action against Lane. I could destroy both of them completely," Claire said. "Yes, I know." She folded her hands on the table. "I'm not interested in destruction," she said. "I'm interested in being done. I want the injunction lifted. I want my company clear. I want my daughter protected. And I want Derek to understand. Not in a courtroom, not in the press, but genuinely understand what he threw away and what it cost." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "You know, Calloway said, 'Finally,'" he said slowly. "In 30 years of doing this, I have never had anyone sit across from me and give me a weapon against my own client." "I'm not giving you a weapon," Claire said. "I'm giving Derek a choice. There's a difference." She stood. 48 hours, she said. "After that, I proceed on my own." She left. In the elevator down, she felt her hands shake. Not from fear, from the sheer expenditure of holding that much certainty for that long in a room full of people waiting for her to crack. She texted Morgan. "Done." Morgan texted back, "I have 3 kinds of cheese and a bottle of sparkling cider in the car. Where are you?" Despite everything, Claire laughed out loud in the elevator. It bounced off the metal walls and came back to her and sounded, she thought, like someone who was going to be okay. Derek called her directly that evening. She had been expecting Richard Calloway. She got Derek, which was different, which meant he had read the file himself and had sent his lawyer away and was sitting somewhere, alone with the knowledge of what Warren Lane had done and what Claire had chosen to do with that knowledge. He sounded, for the first time in their divorce, like himself. Not the CEO, not the performance, just a man who had been handed a mirror and made to look at it. "He was using me," Derek said. "Yes," Claire said. "The whole time. Jessica, the timing of the divorce, all of it. Yes? You knew before I did. A few weeks ago, yes. And you told me instead of using it." Claire thought about how to explain this. "I gave your lawyer the information," she said. "What you do with it is yours. I'm not your enemy, Derek. I never was. I was your wife. And I was invisible to you for 20 years, which was partly my fault for allowing it, but it was mostly yours for choosing not to look." Silence. Then, "I underestimated you." "I know. For 20 years. I know that too." Another long silence. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that doesn't fix anything." "No," Claire said. "It doesn't. But I believe you mean it, so I'm noting it. That's very measured of you. I've had a lot of practice being measured." She could hear him breathe. "The settlement," he said. I'm going to call Richard tomorrow. I want to move toward a final agreement, on fair terms. Tell him to call Stephanie, Claire said. She'll handle it from there. Okay. Derek. Yeah. Deal with Lane through your own attorneys. Don't let him take what's left of your company. Whatever else happened between us, those 340 employees at your firm didn't deserve any of this, either. A long pause. Okay, he said. Claire. Good night, Derek. She ended the call. She sat in her apartment with Eleanor asleep in the bassinet beside her chair and the Boston skyline visible through the window and the quiet of a life that was finally, tentatively, beginning to become her own. Her phone buzzed. Morgan. Did he call? What happened? Are you okay? I have the cheese. Claire. I'm okay. Bring the cheese. Morgan. I'm already in the elevator. Claire set down the phone. She looked at Eleanor. Eleanor slept with the complete unconscious confidence of someone who has never had to earn the right to take up space. Claire intended to make sure she never had to. The final settlement was signed on a Wednesday morning in family court. Judge Oakes presided, her silver hair and reading glasses giving her the appearance of someone who had seen every version of this story and was committed to a fair outcome regardless. Full custody of Eleanor to Claire, asset split of 40% to Claire, reflecting 20 years of documented contributions. Public acknowledgement from Hartwell Capital regarding the intellectual property theft, framed as a licensing dispute that had been resolved, which was technically accurate and practically the most Derek's board would accept. Derek's voluntary resignation from day-to-day operations at Hartwell Capital, effective the following week. The Lane lawsuit, withdrawn, in exchange for Claire's agreement not to be the party who took the insider trading documentation to the SEC. She was not obligated to prevent others from doing so. Gerald Fitch, as it happened, had made his own calculations about what came next. The gavel came down. 20 years ended with a sound like a door closing quietly. Outside the courthouse, 3 photographers. Claire walked past them with Eleanor in a carrier against her chest. 8 weeks old, asleep, entirely unbothered by history being made above her head. One reporter called out, "Ms. Foster, any statement?" Claire stopped, turned. "It's Ms. Foster," she said. "And one thing, I spent 20 years being invisible. I'm done with that." She kept walking. 6 months later. Eleanor Claire Foster Hartwell was 6 months old and had Claire's grandmother's hands and what Morgan described, with great confidence, as a suspicious level of strategic awareness for an infant. She sat, in a bouncer, beside Claire's desk at Foster Technology Group headquarters and regarded the world with the focused attention of someone taking notes. The Foster Technology Group and Meridian merger was complete. Valuation: $1.4 billion. Claire was on the cover of Forbes, not as someone's wife, but as herself in her office. Eleanor in a bassinet beside the desk. The caption read, "The CEO who refused to choose." Morgan had cried when she saw it. She had also immediately ordered 12 copies and framed one for the conference room, and one for the needlepoint wall, and one for Eleanor's nursery. Patricia Hartwell, Derek's mother, had called Claire the morning the cover came out. Patricia was 71 years old, silver-haired and precise. The woman who had built the original Hartwell family fortune before handing the company to her son. She had, in the months since the settlement, become an unexpected presence in Claire and Eleanor's life. She came for Sunday dinners. She held Eleanor with careful tenderness. She and Claire did not discuss Derek directly. They discussed business and what it took to build something lasting. "I saw the cover," Patricia said that morning. "Thank you for calling," Claire said. "I want you to know," Patricia said, "that I am aware I enabled a great deal of what happened. by not speaking sooner, by protecting my son from consequences he had earned. Patricia, let me finish. I am not asking for absolution. I'm telling you I see it clearly now, and I intend to spend the next portion of my life ensuring that Eleanor grows up knowing that her grandmother understands the difference between loyalty and complicity. Claire was quiet for a moment. She's going to love you, Claire said. She already does, Patricia said. She grabbed my finger last Sunday and did not let go for 11 minutes. I timed it. Claire smiled. Derek had filed formal paperwork relinquishing parental rights 4 months after Eleanor's birth. A brief note came with it. She deserves better than a part-time father who does not know how to be present. You were right. Give her the life I could not give you. Claire had signed the papers without hesitation. She had felt no triumph. She had felt completion. That evening, she sat in the nursery with Eleanor asleep in the crib. The soft green and yellow walls she had painted herself when she was 7 months pregnant and still building an empire in secret. She opened the journal she had been keeping and wrote. 5 months ago today, she wrote, I sat alone in a restaurant waiting for a husband who never came. I thought that was the worst night of my life. I was wrong. It was the best night because it was the night I stopped waiting. The night I decided I was done being invisible. The night everything changed. You are here now, Eleanor. You are 5 months old and you have changed every calculation I ever made about what matters. Your father isn't part of our daily life. That will be hard sometimes. I cannot protect you from that, but I can tell you this. His absence is about his limitations, not your worth. You are extraordinary, Eleanor. You were extraordinary from the moment you were born, and you will be extraordinary your entire life. Not because of who your parents are or are not, but because of who you choose to become. I am going to make mistakes raising you. I am going to be too protective sometimes and not protective enough at others. I am going to struggle with the balance of all of it. But I promise you this, I will never make you feel invisible. I will never tell you to be smaller so someone else can be bigger. You are Eleanor Claire Foster. You are named for the grace I learned to give myself and for the woman I was when I finally stopped hiding. Be brave, my darling. Be strategic. Be true to yourself, even when the world tells you to be something else. And remember, the greatest power you will ever have is the power to define yourself on your own terms. With all my love, always. Mom. She closed the journal. She sat in the rocking chair in the soft light of Eleanor's nursery and listened to her daughter breathe. From the living room, her phone buzzed with a message from Morgan. Goldman Sachs called. They want to expand the contract. This is going to be a very good year, boss. Claire smiled. She typed back, Tell them Tuesday. We have time. She set the phone down. She looked around the nursery she had built for her daughter. The room that belonged to her, in the apartment that belonged to her, in the life that was finally, completely, irrevocably hers. She thought about that anniversary dinner, the empty chair, the photograph with its cruel caption, the champagne she had not touched. She thought about every dinner party where Derek had talked over her, every introduction where she had been just my wife, every year of being quiet and small and strategic in the deepest sense of the word, which is to say, not just careful, but building something real underneath the surface, of a life that looked like nothing at all. She had spent 20 years invisible. She had spent 11 years building an empire in the dark. She had spent 6 months stepping into the light. And here is what she knew now, sitting in the soft quiet of her daughter's room, worth more than she had ever imagined, and loved more fiercely than she had ever been. Invisible is not the same as powerless. Strategic is not the same as dishonest. Quiet is not the same as weak. And the moment you stop letting someone else define your worth is not a dramatic moment. It does not happen in a courtroom or a boardroom or on the cover of Forbes. It happens in a kitchen at midnight when you send 3 texts to 3 people who believe in what you have built, and you decide that what comes next is going to be different. That was the moment. Everything else was just the world catching up. She looked at Eleanor, sleeping with complete unconscious confidence. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're going to be okay. We are, in fact," she said, and she almost laughed at how completely and exactly true this was. Going to be extraordinary. Eleanor stirred in her sleep, made a small sound, settled. The city hummed beyond the windows. Foster Technology Group ran on 3 monitors in her home office, down the hall, data flowing like a river that did not stop. Outside, somewhere in Boston, women were building things in secret, preparing, waiting for exactly the right moment. They would be ready. They always were. Closing disclaimer. This story was developed, written, and produced by our creative team. All characters are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real individuals or situations is coincidental. This content is created for entertainment and inspiration. We believe in the power of storytelling to help people feel less alone and a little more brave. Thank you for watching.